The gray clouds rolled over the cemetery that morning, covering the sky as if they shared the sorrow of everyone standing there. The air was cold and quiet, broken only by the soft sound of boots on gravel and the rustle of flags in the wind. The funeral of a young soldier had brought together hundreds of people, soldiers, friends, and families who came to honor a life that ended too soon. Among them stood an older man, his back straight, his face strong but tired. His name was Michael Harris, a retired Army veteran who had once served his country with pride. But today he wasn't there as a soldier. He was there as a father, saying goodbye to his only son, Daniel. Michael's eyes followed the flag-draped casket as it was carried by the honor guard. Every step felt like a hammer against his heart. He remembered Daniel as a little boy running through the yard with a toy soldier in his hand, laughing and shouting, "One day I'll be like you, Dad." At the time, Michael had laughed too. He never imagined that dream would one day bring such unbearable pain. Daniel had been just 24, full of life, courage, and heart. He had served overseas, always calling home when he could. Michael could still hear his son's voice over the phone saying, "Don't worry, Dad. I'm doing what I was born to do." And now, that same brave boy was coming home in a flag-covered coffin. As the chaplain spoke softly about honor, sacrifice, and love for the nation, Michael stood silently beside his ex-wife and daughter. His hands were shaking slightly, but he kept them at his sides, trying to stand as firm as the soldier he once was. The sound of the rifle salute echoed through the air, 3 sharp cracks that seemed to tear through his heart. When the bugler began to play taps, the haunting notes drifted over the crowd. Michael's throat tightened. That tune had always been beautiful to him, but now it sounded like a farewell that reached deep into his soul. He tried to keep his balance, to stay strong like he always had. But his knees felt weak, his chest heavy. He looked at the casket one more time, at the flag that would soon be folded and placed into his trembling hands. And the world began to blur. He took a deep breath, but it wasn't enough. The pain inside him was too heavy. Years of discipline couldn't stop what his heart was feeling. The faces of those around him faded, and all he could see was Daniel as a young boy, running into his arms after school, his small hands clutching a paper medal he made for his dad. "You're my hero," Daniel had said back then. Now it was Michael's turn to whisper through trembling lips, "No, son, you're mine." The crowd didn't notice right away when Michael's legs began to wobble. His daughter gasped as he reached out to steady himself, but it was too late. His knees buckled and he collapsed onto the ground beside the casket. A stunned silence fell over the cemetery. The soldiers standing at attention didn't move at first. No one was sure what to do. Michael's body shook as he tried to breathe, his heart pounding unevenly. He had always been a man of strength and pride, but now he felt powerless. The grief had struck him harder than any wound he had ever taken in battle. His daughter knelt beside him, calling out his name in panic, but he couldn't respond. In that frozen moment, all eyes turned toward the front where a line of ceremonial guards stood, perfectly still, their faces expressionless beneath their white gloves and polished medals. These were the tomb guards, men known for their strict discipline and unmatched dedication. One of them, a young guard named Staff Sergeant Miller, noticed the fallen veteran. His heart skipped a beat. His training told him to remain motionless, to keep formation no matter what happened. But his soul told him something different. From where he stood, Miller could see the pain in the old man's eyes, a pain he understood all too well. He had seen loss before. He had seen fathers bury sons, soldiers bury friends. The guard's jaw tightened. For a few seconds, the world seemed to hold its breath. Michael's daughter called for help, her voice trembling. A few people rushed forward, but before anyone could reach him, the tomb guard took one step forward. Then another. His polished boots crunched against the gravel, breaking the perfect stillness that had defined the ceremony until now. The crowd turned their heads in disbelief. A tomb guard was not supposed to move from his post during a ceremony. It was nearly unthinkable, but in that moment the rules didn't matter to Miller. Humanity did. He moved quickly but respectfully, kneeling down beside the fallen veteran. "Sir, can you hear me?" he asked softly, his voice calm and steady. He took off his white gloves and gently placed 2 fingers against Michael's neck to check for a pulse. The man was breathing but weak, his eyes closed, his face pale. "Medic," the guard called out, his voice cutting through the heavy silence. The ceremony paused. Soldiers nearby rushed to bring medical aid. The crowd watched in awe as the tomb guard, still in his ceremonial uniform, stayed by Michael's side, supporting him with one arm while helping to clear the area. Michael's eyes fluttered open slightly. Through his blurred vision, he saw the young guard's face, calm, respectful, and full of empathy. "My son," he whispered faintly. "I know, sir," Miller replied gently. "He's a hero." "You both are." Tears welled up in Michael's eyes, but a faint smile appeared too. Even in his weakness, he felt the warmth of the guard's words, a reminder that he was not alone, that his son's sacrifice would never be forgotten. As the medics arrived and began to help him, Miller stayed close until they lifted the veteran onto a stretcher. Only when he was sure the man was safe did the guard step back and return to attention, his posture perfect once again. The ceremony continued, but the crowd would never forget what they had just witnessed. The silence that followed was not just grief anymore. It was respect, deep, heartfelt respect for both father and son, and for the guard who chose compassion over rules. That moment would stay with everyone who stood there, reminding them that behind every uniform is a heart that still beats with love, courage, and humanity. The sun began to peek through the gray clouds as Michael slowly opened his eyes. He was lying on a stretcher near the edge of the cemetery, surrounded by people who looked at him with concern. His head felt heavy and his vision was still a bit blurry. For a moment he didn't know where he was. Then the sound of the bugle playing softly in the distance reminded him he was at his son's funeral. A medic spoke gently. "Sir, you fainted. You need to rest for a moment." But Michael's eyes immediately searched for the flag-covered casket. "My son," he whispered weakly. "Don't worry, sir," another soldier said. "The ceremony paused for you. Your son is still being honored." Michael turned his head slightly and saw something that made his heart stop. A young tomb guard, still standing nearby, watching him with quiet concern. It was the same guard who had rushed forward when he collapsed. Even now, after returning to formation, the guard stood perfectly still, but his eyes showed something more than duty. They showed compassion. Michael wanted to thank him, but his throat was dry and words didn't come out. The medics offered him water, but all he could do was stare at the guard. In that moment, he felt something change inside him. He had always believed soldiers should never break formation, never show emotion, but this young man had done both, and he had done it for him. After a few minutes, the medics helped Michael sit up. His daughter knelt beside him, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Dad, you scared us," she said softly. Michael took her hand and gave a small, tired smile. "I'm okay," he whispered. "I just saw too much in one moment." The officer in charge approached carefully. "Sir, if you'd like, we can continue the service whenever you're ready." Michael nodded. "No," he said slowly, "I need to stand. My son deserves that." With help from the medics, he stood on shaky legs. The crowd watched silently as the veteran returned to his place. The tomb guard, standing near the casket, gave a brief nod of respect, a gesture that said more than words ever could. When the ceremony resumed, every sound, every movement felt heavier with meaning. The soldiers folded the flag with perfect precision, each crease a symbol of honor, each turn of fabric filled with quiet respect. Michael watched with teary eyes, his heart pounding with both pride and sorrow. When the final fold was made, the folded flag was presented to him. The officer held it out and said softly, "On behalf of a grateful nation." But before he could finish, Michael's eyes filled with tears. His hands trembled as he took the flag, holding it close to his chest as if it were his son himself. "Thank you," he whispered. The crowd stood silent. Some wiped away tears. They had all seen the strength of a soldier and the love of a father come together in one powerful moment. But it wasn't over yet. As the people began to leave, Michael asked to speak with the young guard who had come to his aid. It took a moment before the guard was allowed to step out of formation. When he approached, his posture was still straight, his expression calm, but there was a warmth in his eyes that words couldn't hide. Michael extended his hand. "Son, I don't even know your name," he said softly. "But what you did today, it meant more than you'll ever know." The guard shook his hand firmly. "Sir, I'm Staff Sergeant Miller," he said with quiet pride. "I only did what any soldier should do." Michael looked into his eyes. "No," he replied. "You did what a good man does." There was a pause. The wind carried the faint rustle of leaves through the trees. Miller finally said. "Sir, I saw you standing there. I could tell how much you loved him. I couldn't just stand and do nothing. My duty isn't only to stand guard, it's to protect the living, too." Michael felt his chest tighten again, but this time not from pain, from gratitude. He placed a trembling hand on Miller's shoulder. "You honored my son in a way I'll never forget," he said. The young guard nodded respectfully. "Your son's sacrifice will never be forgotten, sir. He lives on through people like you." Those simple words pierced Michael's heart. He realized that even though his son was gone, his spirit had left a mark, on the world, on strangers, even on this soldier who had never met him. As the crowd began to thin, Michael's daughter came forward, her eyes still red from crying. "Dad, maybe we should go home," she said softly. But Michael looked out over the field of white tombstones, each one standing as a symbol of sacrifice. "No," he said. "I think I'll stay for a little while." The guard understood. "Take your time, sir," he said. "I'll stay nearby," and he did. Even though the ceremony was over, Miller remained at attention, standing a few yards away, watching silently as Michael knelt beside his son's resting place. Michael ran his fingers along the edge of the tombstone, tracing the name engraved in stone. "Daniel Harris," it read. "Beloved son, soldier, and hero." The words felt both heavy and comforting. He whispered, "I'm proud of you, son. You did everything right, and today a stranger reminded me what honor truly means." As the sun broke through the clouds completely, its warm light fell across the grass, lighting up the rows of graves like quiet sentinels of history. The air felt softer, calmer, as if the world itself wanted to give him peace. Michael stood again with the folded flag still pressed to his chest. When he turned, the tomb guard was still there, standing tall and motionless, the sunlight reflecting off his uniform. For a long moment, the two men looked at each other. One represented the past, a soldier who had given all he could. The other represented the present, a soldier still carrying the torch of duty and respect. Michael lifted his hand slowly and gave a salute, a gesture of gratitude and brotherhood. Miller immediately returned the salute, his movements crisp and precise. In that moment, two generations of soldiers stood united in silence, connected by something greater than words, the bond of service, respect, and sacrifice. The small group of people who remained watched in awe. Some had tears in their eyes again, not because of sadness, but because of the beauty of what they were seeing. When Michael finally left, supported by his daughter, he turned back one last time to look at the guard. Miller hadn't moved an inch, his eyes still forward, his duty still in place. But Michael could tell, behind that discipline was a heart that understood. The days after the funeral passed slowly for Michael. The house felt too quiet without Daniel's laughter or the sound of his boots by the door. Everywhere he looked, there were reminders of his son. His photographs, his medals, his old uniform hanging neatly in the closet. Sometimes Michael would sit in Daniel's room for hours, holding the folded flag to his chest, remembering the boy who had once dreamed of being a hero. The world outside moved on, but for Michael, time stood still. Every night he replayed that moment at the cemetery, the sound of taps, the sudden collapse, and then the young tomb guard rushing to his side. That image stayed in his mind like a bright light in the middle of the darkness. The guard's calm voice, his steady hands, and the respect in his eyes had touched something deep inside Michael's heart. A week later, Michael received a letter in the mail. The envelope was official-looking, with a military seal. Inside was a short note written in neat handwriting. "Mr. Harris, I wanted to check on you after the funeral. It was an honor to serve that day and to witness your strength as a father. Your son inspired many, even those who never met him. Staff Sergeant Miller." Michael read the letter several times. It wasn't long or fancy, but it carried warmth, honesty, and a kind of sincerity that words rarely have. He placed it on the mantel beside Daniel's picture and whispered, "Thank you, son. Because of you, I met someone who still carries the meaning of service." Days turned into weeks, and something began to change in Michael. He stopped sitting in silence all day. Instead, he started walking to the Veterans Park every morning, sometimes bringing flowers for other graves too. People there began recognizing him. They'd nod respectfully, knowing his story. Some even came to talk to him. Other parents who had lost children, soldiers who had served with Daniel, and young cadets who had heard about the ceremony that had gone viral online. Yes, viral. Someone from the funeral had recorded the moment when the tomb guard broke formation to help Michael. The video had quietly spread on social media, shared by people who were deeply moved by what they saw. Within days, millions had watched it. News channels called it a salute of humanity. The footage showed everything: the collapse, the quick reaction, and the salute shared between the older veteran and the young guard at the end. It wasn't dramatic. It was simple and real. And that simplicity was what touched everyone. Michael didn't know about the video at first. It was his daughter who showed it to him one evening. "Dad," she said softly, holding her phone toward him, "you need to see this." He watched quietly as the moment played out again. His fall, the guard rushing forward, the crowd's silence, and finally, the salute. When the video ended, he didn't speak for a while. His eyes glistened, but there was a faint smile on his face. "People are writing comments," his daughter said, scrolling down. "They're saying how this reminded them of kindness and compassion, even in the most formal places." Some said they cried watching it. Michael leaned back in his chair, still holding the folded flag on his lap. "Maybe that's Daniel's last mission," he said softly. "To remind the world that honor isn't just about war, it's about love." After that, life started to take a gentler shape. A few months later, Michael received an invitation from a local military base to attend a special ceremony. The letter explained that they wanted to honor both his son and the tomb guard who had acted with such bravery that day. When the day came, Michael wore his old uniform again. It fit a little tighter now, but it still carried the same pride it once did. His daughter came with him, helping pin his medals in place. As they arrived at the base, soldiers lined up to greet him. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered, but all Michael saw was the young guard standing at the front, Staff Sergeant Miller. When their eyes met again, it felt as though no time had passed. Miller stepped forward and saluted sharply. Michael returned the salute, his eyes wet but steady. They shook hands just like before, but this time they both smiled. The commander stepped up to the podium. "Today we honor two soldiers, one who gave his life in service and one who showed that the heart of a soldier beats not just for duty, but for compassion." Together they reminded us what it truly means to serve. The applause that followed was soft but emotional. Michael could feel it deep in his chest. Not pride, but peace. The ceremony continued with speeches, a short tribute video, and finally a moment of silence. As everyone bowed their heads, Michael felt Daniel's presence around him, not as sadness anymore, but as warmth. After the event, people came up to shake his hand. Some were parents, others were young soldiers just starting their journeys. One of them, a teenager in uniform, said, "Sir, because of your story, I joined the army. I want to serve with heart, not just rules." Michael smiled gently. "Then my son's spirit lives on," he said. As the evening light began to fade, Michael and Miller walked together along the edge of the parade ground. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. The bond between them had already been written by that day at the cemetery. Finally, Miller said quietly, "Sir, I'll never forget that moment. It changed how I see my duty." Michael looked at him thoughtfully. "And I'll never forget you, son. You reminded me that no matter how broken the world gets, there will always be people who choose to do the right thing." They stopped for a moment, watching the sunset paint the sky with orange and gold. The flags around the base fluttered in the soft wind, glowing in the warm light. Michael took a deep breath and smiled. For the first time in months, his heart didn't feel heavy. He knew Daniel would have been proud, not just of him, but of the man standing beside him. That night, as he sat by the window at home, Michael opened his son's photo album. He looked at Daniel's smiling face and whispered, "You see, son? The world still remembers. You're still making a difference." He then folded the letter from Staff Sergeant Miller and placed it carefully inside the album. "Two soldiers met at your farewell," he said softly, "and now they'll carry your story wherever they go." Outside, the night sky was full of stars, quiet, steady, and bright, just like the men and women who served beneath it. And somewhere among those stars, a father's love and a son's courage lived on, shining forever.